Chairman of the QS Professional Group, Trevor, I did say at the outset, and I think you need to recognise, in the first instance, anecdotally, there's about, and I said it, I know you couldn't make the start, there are some issues in relation to wait and see what in terms of QS's delay, and we acknowledge there's a delay in QS uptake, right? We're waiting, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of waiting to see what the designers are doing. There's also the unescapable economic reality that there's been through a very tough time over the last number of years, and particularly provincially, and there's a time investment cost and a software cost, and there are other issues as well in terms of there's been a huge raft of change in the industry, the small practice, and you have to understand that the QS profession, about 60 or 70%, Eddie McCauley here might tell me exactly, but 60 or 70% of the profession work in practices of less than 10 members. So you're talking about a lot of, it's very fragmented. It's not a small practice, so it's a big consideration for them. But I do think that the upturn in the economic outlook will help uptake, and certainly the QS Professional Group is promoting it strongly, as you know, through the working group. So just couldn't let you go unchallenged on some of your stuff, but fascinating nonetheless. So look, that also brought you all a bit of time to think about your questions. So we're over to questions and answers then, please, for anyone in the panel. So we have a roving mic, and maybe you could say your name and who you're addressing the query to as well as you phrase your questions, please.
Hello, my name is Robert Moore. I'd like to just, I suppose, ask Trevor or the rest of the panel. Trevor, you've indicated that there's no need to code the models for the architect or any of the engineers to do it. It can be done afterwards. Would the rest of the panel agree with that?
We code because we don't want to wait on the designers to code. And Uniclass tables are incomplete and might necessarily align with what way we want it coded. But look, if I got a model that was coded, great. We use the coding as our check mark. So if we have a code on an object, we know we've checked it. So it's our tick in the box that it's been coded. But I certainly wouldn't discourage architects or designers from coding models. I wouldn't sort of be saying, well, a QS said we don't have to code models. If you code, you can get an awful lot more benefits using model checking software such as Celebri in that. So I wouldn't be saying don't code. The reason we code is that we don't want to wait on architects or designers to code, and we use it as a check mark.
And just one thing, what coding would you recommend? Would it be ARM4 and Uniclass, or is there other coding that could be put in?
We've been using the National Standard Building Elements and the ARM coding to suit our particular purposes. With different clients, we've used different systems. We've used Masterform, we've used Uniclass, we've used Omniclass. It really depends on the client.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Rob, I don't know if that's working, but I think you asked what we thought about that as well. And I totally agree with Trevor in that if we're getting models across that aren't coded, it's not a problem for us. It's not an excuse. We can't do takeoffs because it's not coded. Good practice would suggest that designers should be coding in whichever classification, Uniclass, 2 or whatever that may be, but it's not a hindrance to us, and we have our own codes, and I personally wouldn't expect design teams to code in accordance with ARM4, for example. That's our role, but they should be coding in accordance with Uniclass.
Gary, would you?
Yeah, well, I'd maybe be slightly more harder on the designers, and I think while we can get around instances where codes are not there, I think as a basic starting point, I would be encouraging designers to actually code to the standard that the project has been set at. As I said, whether it's Uniclass 2 or 2015, whatever system, code to it. One of the things that we're looking at, I suppose, on the Nutrition Hospital with the designers is, and again, this gets back to, I suppose, the core function of what we've been, it's about collaboration, is sitting down with them and saying, if this is how you're doing it, can you do something slightly different that will make our job easier, better, faster, that will make your job easier, better, faster, and it is a bit of a circle. So I wouldn't be inclined to let the designers off without coding. We can deal with it if it's not, but I think as a starting point, I would like to see the information in the model.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions? Sorry, one down here. Yeah.
Joseph Little of DIT. We're in education. We're faced with the question of, CAD was exciting and new in the mid '90s, early '90s, and now obviously BIM has a similar position, albeit it's a much more sophisticated thing. What do we teach our young QSs and our young architects? Do we bother to teach them 2D, 3D CAD, or does that get laid aside entirely? That question of where is the industry? You've already said the industry is in very different places. Maybe quantity surveyors has this poor uptake than you'd like to see. So what do we teach our students? Can we teach them both? I mean, that itself would impose a huge burden on the time available and all the things that they need to learn otherwise.
Trevor, maybe in the first instance?
Yeah, I think collaboration. I would teach them collaboration. I know they have to do some CAD, but I would look to teach them collaboration and the collaborative aspects of it. And for QSs, it would be to know, well, what are the workflows for an architect or for an engineer in producing information. A big part of level 2 BIM is producing task information delivery plans and knowing when you need information produced. There still is place for 2D, but I would like to see the focus, if you are picking, being on designing in 3D, whether it's SketchUp or whether it's Revit or whether it's ArchiCAD. I think the focus should be on initially teaching in 3D.
I think I'd be maybe somewhat more old school than Trevor there. I mean, not in any way dissimilar to quantity surveyors. I wouldn't encourage DIT to be not teaching students how to use the scale rule. I think that sort of, there needs to be an understanding of maybe some of the older methods, but an emphasis put on 3D. Once you understand sort of some of the other methods, that allows you to use those methods when you need them, but also to focus on the newer technologies.
I suppose, Simmer, I'd be inclined to maybe come down on more on Birian's side in this one. Sorry, no, but I suppose a caveat. I think the new generation of students coming out of second level, they're far more comfortable in a digital environment. It's the one that they grow up with. When the transition happened in the 80s, 90s in relation to 2D drawing with paper versus AutoCAD, that was probably more of the sea change from at that time. I think now all the kids in colleges, they have iPads, they have phones. That's the environment that they work in. They're far more comfortable in a digital environment. But from an experience and from an understanding of the process, there's a lot to be gained from being able to do stuff in 2D, understanding it, see how it comes together. I think they can, but I think the environment is moving into 3D. They need to be able to do that in 3D. But when they come out of colleges, it said, as Michal said, the industry isn't all about big practices, with 400 architects. It's a mixture. And depending on where they go and what part of the industry they go into, they need to be able to operate in dual environments at the moment.
Just Minecraft, Joe.
Yeah. No, but it's an important part in Ireland particularly is just the recognition that there's a huge change of scale, difference in scale in practices provincially and in the larger towns, and we'll never have 100% BIM saturation, for the want of a better word. So I suppose we need to be cognizant of that, I do think.
I'd appreciate that, but the benefits for designers producing their drawings in Revit or ArchiCAD, a lot of the designers are using the models. They're there.
Yeah,
it's low-hanging fruit. So for and the small QS practice, Austin Redding, well, not small, but Austin Redding Company, they made the jump back in 2012. They bought Costex not because of the BIM capabilities, but because of its capabilities to improve their 2D takeoff and speed of 2D takeoff. Yeah. What I'm advocating is that QS's be as a one-man band is look at the digital tools and see, can you improve your workflow. An awful lot of the work is going to be 2D for the foreseeable future, but if you can get a BIM model, jump at it.
Okay. Over here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sean O'Keefe with the Headcount Group. In relation to your question, don't stop teaching 2D. I taught architectural school for over a decade, and when it comes to details, we don't model sealant, annotations, and title blocks, and things like that. For the panel, I've developed 4D, 5D BIM tools for over 10 years for the U.S. government and so forth. I see a lot of focus on CostX, which maybe you can tell me why CostX is so predominant. The reason why I ask is, I see a disconnection between dimensions. So in the tools I would create, and even in my ND ontology I created, all dimensions should be linked together. So the dimensions themselves should be interoperable. So what I'm getting at is certain tools that, Trevor, you're probably familiar with, Vico Office,
Yeah.
and I see a lack of focus on the databases, the costing for materials, resources, and labor. We don't need a model down to nuts and bolts because those are in the database. I don't see an emphasis on the schedule, the 4D linked to the 5D with CostX. So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, if I had the cash and I was working for a contractor, I would be using a tool like Vico, where you're using assemblies, using libraries of your components, you're automatically pulling your line of balance or your schedule from the objects associated or linked to the model. CostX, because it supports 2D and supports 3D at the moment, it will allow you to bring in a single line diagram or a schematic and extract and pull quantities from that. For someone to get started, even with a file format called IFC, there's a free tool which allows you to take an IFC model and pull all of the information from that model into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's a zero cost for a QS to pull quantities from an IFC model. There are free viewers out there that will let you go and then visualize those quantities. So it doesn't have to cost money. CostX, it's a tool that works for me because it does 2D and 3D. I would like to use Vico. There's a couple of other platforms as well I'd like to look at, but it's just time. But I think linking it to the schedule is vital. We're not leveraging the ability, we're looking at what we want. If we link it to schedule, we're looking at what we want, when we want it, where we want it. So we're looking at location and time-based quantities, which is the goal for, I think, estimators or commercial managers.
Right, that's another thing I was going to ask about, the downfalls of it not being linked to the schedule. I heard one of the other gentlemen mention wanting costs through at certain phases or defined phases, and I think it would be easier to get that if there wasn't that disconnect with the schedule. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
I suppose just on that in relation to why we used it, Trevor, we would have used CostX again, but that transition was in relation to a 2D digital platform. In relation to scheduling and linking 4D and 5D, I suppose traditionally the responsibility for the production of the project schedule and the management of the project schedule does not lie with the QS. So I suppose having a system to produce the schedule and monitor and actually have the schedule, a 5D and 4D linked together, they're probably two separate workflows that are being created by two different elements of the design team. So I suppose maybe that is why, as one of the elements, is why QSs don't traditionally are responsible for schedule.
Yeah, I come from a world of design build,
Yeah.
where a lot of that's connected together.
Yeah, and in that environment, it's much more holistic, and when the transition happens over to the contractor from the design build, they take responsibility for everything at that. They're responsible for far more. And I suppose the design and build versus traditional, it's almost like, I won't say a parallel process, but it's a slightly different process.
And CostX, and this is just from my own knowledge, I'm just curious. So CostX was a nice first stepping stone to switch from 2D, 3D.
Yeah, maybe if I can answer that. At one stage within BAM, we were looking at which platform we'd use. At the time, there were a couple available on the market. And back to what Mihal stated, some were more expensive than others.
Cost as well, yeah.
Yeah, the cost of the software itself. We have a mix of software. We don't only use CostX. We have different platforms that we use. Some of them have different strengths and weaknesses, but in my experience, as an overall software which does everything that you will need immediately and isn't the most expensive software out there, then Costex will do that. And as well as the 2D and the 3D aspects, it does allow you to build up your libraries of costs, and so you can invest the time, create things like phraseologies. So if you are producing bills of quantities, then Costex allows you to do that, which other softwares don't. I'm sure, I've never seen Vico, but I'm sure Vico is much more sophisticated.
Are you guys receiving IFC models much? I know Trevor.
No.
Or do you request them?
Everything I see really is in a Revit format.
Because I'll create you guys a model view definition for cost, but you have to use IFC models. That's what the world needs right now is model view definitions for cost.
IFC would be the preferred format. If you take a DWFX file, a file coming out of Revit in that format, it strips out all of the type properties. It only gives you instance properties. So a lot of information is left in the Revit model that doesn't transfer across. Whereas if you use a file like IFC, you're inundated with information. It mightn't be structured the way you want it to be, but all of the information will come across. So our preference is IFC. DWFX is nice, it's lightweight, it's well structured, but you don't get all the information.
Okay. Thanks. I'll pass the mic now.
Yeah. We're conservative. QS take it step by step. We'll get there. Right, Brendan.
Brendan Lupton, McCullough Lupton Quinn, Chartered Quantity Surveyors, Kilkenny and Dublin. A question for the panel, I suppose, in the main. You would have touched on it, and Gary's part of the presentation with regards the model mapping. How much of a role would the panel feel that model mapping and derived quantities would have to increase the usable information from the models for bill of quantity purposes?
It's key. It's the fundamental thing. Is that mapping exercise, mapping properties to the folder structure or to build up your description. It's the key part of it.
Do you think it could increase the percentage in large terms, Trevor, from what's usable?
Yeah.
The derived element.
Yeah, I think the workflow we had there, taking the information out into Excel and supplementing it with some ARM classifications and categories, transforms what you can do from it. You're never going to build a full bill description from a model. You're going to get a clue as to where it should go in a bill of quantities. But you're going to build up the description in the workbook separate from it, or you'll have to pull it in from the specification. There isn't a huge amount of information in models in terms of a spec in that. There'll be something that might point you to what the object is. And as the guy said, you're having to refer to the door schedule or having to refer to the object naming conventions to try and translate that or map that to the actual bill description.
How did you manage that in the hospital, Gary?
Model mapping is our starting point. It is, and that is probably one of the first functions that we do, is create the model map for the project and go from there.
Vernon, you might have an opinion. I know when I would have met with yourself in Grange Corner at the time, you were using for your subcontracts, you were pulling the quantities and sending out subcontract. Would you have much adaptation or mapping to do to the quantities in that process?
Yeah, like the model mapping, as the guys have said, is probably the first and most, not the most basic, but certainly the first function that in the transition from 2D to 3D is what you need to understand. And I guess the mapping itself isn't too complex. It's more about, understanding models, how they're created, what properties they contain in order to create a map to obtain that information. So it's not the mapping that needs a huge amount of time to understand, it's understanding the model itself.
Thank you.
Okay, one at the back there, Barbara, please.
I suppose just kind of following on from that point, do you think there's a time and place, I suppose, for standard model maps industry-wise?
Different designers use tools in different fashion. They model in different fashions. I'd love if there was a standard way that people use ArchiCAD or Revit, but I don't see it happening. What we have is we'd have a model map we would use for particular designers. So we tweak the map to match how designer X models or how they use Revit or how they handle generic objects versus a model map for designer Y. Or it would be project to project. I don't think there'll be a standard sort of industry-wide model map.
Okay.
Hi, William Power from Ready Architecture and Urbanism. Just to follow up on that point, we do a lot of authoring on models, and one of the biggest problems I have at the moment is trying to figure out what people want out the other side of it.
Yeah.
Do you not think it would be a good idea as an industry to sit down and go, in the ideal world, this is what we would love, and so that we'd have something to base on? Because at the moment, I haven't actually worked on a job where we've had to push quantities out, but if I did, I know that every different QS I sit down would want different things. So to have a standard seems logical, no?
Yeah, you're dead on there, William. And it was only something we were discussing this morning. That's kind of the next task that the SESI BIM working group is intending to work on, is to get that information out to the designers, to say, for instance, if you're modelling concrete slabs, then if you're able to model that slab in this fashion from day one, this would suit our needs. And similarly with doors, partitions, whatever that may be. So that is a task that we've identified, and it's something that we have to do in order to help you to help us.
It seems very good, because even from looking around, like I haven't found anything even in the UK or like a similar thing that's done. Like, so it might be some way of defining the Irish industry, I suppose, as well. Like.
So, Barry, and that's underway with the working group, or Gary, is it, in terms of the...
Yeah, I suppose Barry said it's one of the tasks that we realise it's trying to get standard information that we extracted, because I suppose what we do, we're so used to ARM4, as QSs, we all have a pretty good idea as to what we want when we want it. The problem is that architects, engineers, and M&E engineers don't know that. They don't understand what we do. So it's trying to create a document that, depending on the various stage, this is the type of information, this is how we look for it, this is the format. And if that can be set up in the model from day one, it means we're not changing or tweaking it as you move from preliminary into tender stage into post-contract stage.
Sounds like it'd be very helpful anyway.
It would be helpful to QSs as well as the design
designers
team.
as much as QSs. Yeah.
I think willpower for president. Will for president.
There's collaboration achieved this morning.
I think in terms of the ARM, it's to look at the rules measurement and see, can there be a BIM skin put on it, or can it be some rules reviewed in terms of quantification? I mean, a prime example would be MEP systems, that the rules of measurement would state that you would measure through pipe fittings when you're measuring the linears on pipework, and that the fittings are extra over. BIM models between fittings, so having to go back and have a modeler model through fittings to try and accommodate a rule that was designed to help people working with scale rules. So it's to come up with a methodology for having an amendment or something in the contract, say, look, this is how we're going to handle pipework or handle ductwork. It's to look at the rules and see, is there a BIM skin that can be applied to them to try and standardise.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, sorry, yep.
Andrew Jennings from ArtDocs, training consultant. Just yourself, Trevor, there, you mentioned contractors spinning the model. I haven't ever heard that term before. What do you mean by that?
Well, essentially, they're opening the model in Navisworks Freedom or in Design Review and just spinning the model around and walking through it, and that's it. They're not deriving any value from it. It's a visual. There's no 4D or 5D processes being applied to it.
Okay. Okay. Any further questions? Okay, look, we're slightly ahead of schedule, but that's no harm, by a couple of minutes. Obviously, I would like to sincerely thank our three speakers. You don't just turn up on the day and roll out a half-hour, 35-minute presentation. There's a lot of work went into those, so I would please ask you to recognise that, maybe with a bula bus, and a sincere thanks to everybody. In addition, I'd like to thank CETA, Suzanne, Barbara and Owen here today, and CETA generally for organising this event with the SESI, and indeed Claire Crowley. and thank yourselves for attending. And you know, the SCSI, it has a very strong working group in relation to BIM. We will be progressing it. We are flying the flag, and we're available for collaboration again, what have you. So thank you very much, and I hope you got some benefit from this morning. Thank you.